I don't know why I'm arguing against dungeon scaling. I want it. I want it in the game. I can see the downsides.
Yeah, I can agree that it's a downside. Like, people only go into dungeons and they forget about the rest. But on the other hand, as the system is right now, and why not both? You know, why not give people the option to quest at their own speed if they want to, and why not allow people to group up and do dungeons with friends? And the same goes for old raids. How many topics each weekend open up like, we want to go back to vanilla times and Burning Crusade times? Fine, you want that? We're going to scale you down when you enter Black Temple. We're going to scale you down when you enter Molten Core. Go get 40 friends, have fun.
I imagine that guy on the Q&A panel at BlizzCon is kind of regretting how that dude asked about vanilla only servers and he's like, "Oh, you don't want that. It's stupid." And everyone's like, "No, you're stupid."
Well, I mean, it's for everybody for themselves to decide. But I was listening to his question and I was like, is that guy asking the same question that everybody asked each weekend, and every weekend they get the same answer, like, no, we're not going to do it? And I'm personally with the guy who answered the question, like, you don't want that. You don't want to go back to those times. You might think you want that. You might remember it fondly. I mean, for me, Classic will always be the best WoW ever. Not because it was a great game, but it was the first time that I played the game. It was the best social side of the game. I had a whole bunch of fun raiding back then. For me, that will always be the best expansion. That doesn't mean that it's better than that Mr. Pandaria is today, because you can't compare those games. Mr. Pandaria outshines it. But Mr. Pandaria will never be able to capture that nostalgic moment for me back in Classic. And of course there are aspects like the social side, like the difficulty, like a couple of things that I would like to see back into the game. But overall, I would quit if they would go back to Classic times. I would quit. And I think a whole bunch of people who now say, like, I want to play it, will be done in 2 months, and they'll remember why they wanted that new expansion so badly.
Yeah, it's pretty much all nostalgia. I mean, as I said before, I've been playing a classic WoW server, and it's fun for me because I remember back in those days. I remember how difficult all this crap was, and all the little stupid things like leveling up your weapon and aggroing like 50 of these what do they call them? Defias people in the human starting zone.
Yeah.
That stuff is fun because it's all nostalgic. But once you get into the nuts and bolts of what vanilla WoW is, it's just a horribly monotonous, grindy experience. And if they opened up a vanilla WoW server, it would be popular for a while, and then once they get to endgame, even if Blizzard maintained the endgame to make sure people aren't, there's no bugs or anything, like they obviously wouldn't tune things so that it's like all nice like it is today. It just would not be the same. There's no possible way you can recapture that kind of thing. It's just way too late for that. I mean, I can understand people wanting to experience the story from previous expansions. I'm totally on board with that. I mean, you think about Warcraft 3. You can replay any moment of Warcraft 3's story anytime. It's all in one big chunk. Whereas World of Warcraft story is so all over the place. Like, so many different story threads go in so many different directions. And people can't keep up because there's so many at this point. It's like 9 or 10 years since the game released. There's so much stuff in the game, so much story. Not just the main storylines, the sub-storylines that people usually forget about. They're not... Cataclysm removed a lot of the original story.
That's true.
You literally cannot see it unless you go to a vanilla WoW server or unless you go to Noble's channel, which has a lot of...
Well, to be honest, I mean, the story back in Classic was just junk. And not because the story was junk, but the way that it was presented. You had little snippets of story in a quest line and in a quest dialogue that you had to read for 5 minutes before you finally understood where you needed to go. And the storytelling was just bad. And they improved on that. Not even in the Burning Crusade. I believe it was after Lich King that they actually started to make cinematics and actually went with the storytelling. And from that moment on, now we're in Mist of Pandaria, where we have a freaking raid that's an entire story, which is just awesome. I really hope that they're going to do more with that. So, yeah, from the part what they removed with the Kata revamp, as much as I love the Kata revamp, that was actually one of the good things to come out of Cataclysm. Yeah, people miss out on that, and they have no other way besides private servers to ever see that again.
Yeah.
So that part I can agree, but for the most part, people that say they want to go back to those times, and want to relive those moments, yeah, sorry guys, we don't have time machines.
Well,
Wow.
we have the Dark Portal.
Yeah, true, we have Garrosh now and Kairos, that's true. Okay, next question. But before we do, Mr. DD, we've been talking for quite a while, man. Do you still have time to talk? Well, if we're going to keep this in, we just had a little break, and we're fresh and back and ready to go for the next question, which is about questing, Mr. DDGuides. Do you think questing should be more difficult task to complete? Back in Vanilla, the Burning Crusade, there were elite quests where you had to invite at least 1 or 2 more players in order to finish it. Now all the outdoor quests are soloable and no aid is required. This was sent in by Knap.
Knap.
Knap. Alright. So what do you think? Should questing be more difficult? Should it be back to group content? Should more let him come out and kill you instantly?
Well, it's a case of what would better serve the game. Like right now for me, like I can talk from my perspective, but that doesn't necessarily encompass every player of the game. There are so vast an audience that I can't speak for all of them. I feel like if there was an optional way to toggle quests to be elite, to do heroic mode quests, to like more difficult quests to get, say, more experience or better gear. You know, they've got the new system where you have a chance to get a purple piece of gear. Maybe you do that with harder quests. Maybe you could take it on and all the mobs for that quest scale up or something. You know, I'm sure that would take 500 years. I'm more of an armchair developer right now, but some like that kind of change would work. In terms of adding more players in order to finish a quest, this Knap said that it was vanilla TPC. I think it was in Wrath and also Kata, wasn't it? It's only recent that they got.
I think they got rid of it in Wrath because I remember those quests in where Next Ramas is, where you had to kill those big monsters. Those were removed. So I believe it was in the Wrath of the Lich King that they removed it.
I can't remember if it was. Yeah, I don't remember if there's any in Kata, but there was definitely in Wrath. Like you go to Ice Crown and it's like all group quests. They probably removed them in Kata or in Mop, but they were definitely back then. There was some there. Anyway, off the point. If they don't want to go the route of making a toggle a way to make, then they could just put in a few that are extremely difficult that offer you some kind of a significant boost. Maybe you could do a really difficult quest and it gives you an experience boost for a little bit. And you don't have to even pay a microtransaction. It's just you do it in game.
Imagine that.
Yeah, so some incentive to do an extremely difficult quests in your completely brainless leveling up experience, which is what we have now. Like, I think I was extremely disappointed in the MOP leveling experience. I don't know if everyone shares that opinion, but mostly because they introduced a lot of extremely generic quests, and they try to shoehorn some story into it. Like there was that section where you had the three kind of friends, and you're like in like a vehicle kind of situation where you have to snipe down people. You have to walk around and like investigate a murder or something. You have the scene in the forest where you have that woman who turns people to stone or something like that. Yeah. That stuff was, when you're doing mindless questing, you're in a mode, you're in a mindset that I just want to grind out a bunch of this stuff because I want to get to level cap to raid because I am boring and I want to do this now. Whereas when you have this kind of story stuff where it takes you out of your character, out of your element, and kind of says, here, just sit down and just enjoy this story for a bit. You know, you don't have to play, you just have to, actually, no, you do have to play, but you have to kind of change your whole mindset. People don't like that very much. That was the whole, people didn't even like vehicle combat because it made that happen. It was, we don't like to play as some dragon in the Oculus because I'm used to playing Minecraft.
I love the Oculus, man. That was brilliant.
No! No, the Oculus is the devil. It's like where I imagine hell to be, like in real life. Like when you die, you go to the Oculus, and you just
No, it was so much fun riding those dragons, using different tactics. I loved that dungeon.
I get horror shivers even now. Oh, just imagine like a scaled version of that, like a max level. Like we're
Yes.
bringing us back to the game. Oh, yeah, no. Um, oh God, I can't even remember what I was talking about. I was talking about something about the Oculus and how it was horrible.
You were talking about people not enjoying the experience of the mob leveling because they were put out of the character and they just want to do the mindless grind instead of the story.
A lot of people don't actually play this game for the story. They just play it because they like killing stuff. They like the whole leveling up. They like raiding with their friends. So when you put story in when you shove story in their face, in like this kind of oddly interactive element. You got something like the Wrathgate. That was good. That was incredibly good because it was like a movie. You watch it for about 2 or 3 minutes and you're done. Whereas that kind of stuff, where it completely takes you out of the game and is like, it's a little funny story thing here. Enjoy it. Um, People get a bit antsy about that. Or like I get antsy about that. Um, Things like that they I feel like they put that in because it's like we want to break up what your leveling experience. We want to make it a little bit different.
Mhm.
It also goes against the fact that people just don't want that. um, it's just a case of either you make leveling kind of difficult often, or you make it simple all the time and very very grindy based, and you can't really you can't try to wedge other things in there, which is what I feel like they tried to do with Mop. But I don't know how you feel about the whole issue.
Yeah, well, the first part, I like your idea of being able to toggle the difficulty for group quests and get some extra rewards out of it. I think that's a brilliant suggestion because it offers options, and when it comes to WoW, I like options. So that's a pretty damn good suggestion. To Nap, I think what he's hinting at is that it's simplifying the game. It's making more of a single player experience, and to that point, I gotta agree. I kind of miss the part where you actually depended on other characters, other players. And these days, whatever you want to do, except for raiding, you can pretty much do on your own if you want to. So for that part, I agree. And the Mr. Pandaria questing experience, like you said, you can only speak from your own experience. That's what we're doing here. And for me, I loved Mr. Pandaria experience because I loved the story. I loved that they, for once, it wasn't just an endless grind where you had to kill 10 mobs, collect 7 hooves, and get 3 people back to the village. No, this time they chosen to go with a path where there was an idea behind what you were doing. From the moment that you set foot on land in Pandaria, you were dropped into the story, and every zone had cinematics, every zone had its own story to tell. Combine that with new options for questing, like the meditation quest with Lore Walker Cho, like the punching quest in the Valley of the Four Winds, where you met the hidden master and he was going to train you how to punch. And when you go through the Dread Wastes, I think that was called, the Cressering Wilds, you end up back in Valley of the Four Winds, where you use that technique that you learned at level 86 to punch a bug in the face. And then you move on to rolling barrels into Torren or Yungol, whatever they're called, and then to the Kluxi. And those Kluxi you see again in the Seas of Orgrimmar at the end of the expansion. They honor their warning that they gave you at the very start. I think, as a whole, increased my questing experience and increased my enjoyment of it, actually.
Yeah, I guess it's how you approach it, isn't it? I mean, it's more a mindset of if you're going in. My whole thing is that I didn't go into questing with the mindset that I was going to enjoy the story. I'm so used to questing being a grind. I'm so used to just questing because I need to reach a new level. That's why I do dungeons. That's why I spam dungeons, because I can't be bothered going through all the questing stuff because I've done it a bunch of times. I know the story. And it's all a lot of the
Hit the
quest is
button,
just
get max level, and
yeah,
done.
yeah,
Yeah.
go from place to place. Um, so like I'm sure if I did it again with the mindset of like experience, like getting encompassed in the story. I mean, I've only leveled up to 90 like once or twice, and each time, oh, well, the second time I didn't even do the questing experience. I just leveled up through dungeons. The first time, yeah, I was just having straight to level 90, and yeah. Um, but I really feel like if they hadn't set you up beforehand, so that you were so used to quests not really developing the story, they were just there to make you go from point A to point B collecting trinkets for this dude, then I feel like I would have gone into it feeling like I should experience the story. Because when I look for story, I either go on Wikipedia or I look at the cinematics. If there's an interesting cinematic, I'll go, okay, I wouldn't mind learning a little bit more about that story. Like the Jade Temple one. When I saw that statue fall, I'm like, damn it, maybe I should have paid attention because that seemed very important. So yeah, if I don't know, I guess maybe in that respect, it's just like in terms of the story element, it's just me. Um, Having more people in your group while you quest, um, it's difficult because you never know how far people are into a quest, or whether or not they've completed other quests around it. Maybe it'll get better in Warlords, where they have the main story quest that goes through different places and then sub quests. But it's always been a problem for me where I whisper to someone saying, "Hey, do you want to do this quest? Because clearly you're killing the same thing I am. Let's do it together." And either they don't respond, or they just say like, "Oh no, I'm about to be finished," or like they're just started and I've finished, and maybe they don't have the same quests as me. I can't share them with the other person, so it's like, okay, so if I do a group quest with this person, then we're going to be doing this one thing, and then that's it. Like, we probably aren't going to be able to do any other solo quests. Back in the day, it was always a problem where people weren't online to do group quests whenever I wanted to do them, because sometimes I play in the middle of the night, and on an Oceanic server, that's like suicide because there's no one else around. So I'd have a quest log full of group quests. It's like, oh god, I guess I'll have to wait until peak hour and then try and get some people who happen to be on the same quest chain and happen to be here as well. I always figured that scenarios would kind of replace group quests. I think that's what they said. They said group quests would be kind of replaced by scenarios. And then it turns out that didn't happen. I was expecting when I was leveling up through Pandaria that group quests would be the story things that I would queue up, would go in, and then you get to experience this really cool set piece, this story thing. And that didn't happen. You had the level 85 Theramore thing, which I never got to do, and it was locked. And I'm like, this is strange. It had like 4 dungeons, and then you get to level cap. It's like, now I've got a bunch of scenarios. I don't want to do them because I'm level cap and I'm doing dungeons and raids now. Yeah. So I feel like instead of group quests, just do scenarios properly. Like, you can make heroic scenarios as filler for the lack of heroic dungeons. That's fine. You know, that it worked out pretty well, this expansion. But make low level scenarios low level. Make it for leveling. Like, and make it more story based. Do exactly what you did on the Throne of Thunder. Oh, sorry, the Isle of Thunder. And develop the story as you go. Make people be able to repeat it when they level up, so they can see the story. And yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Well, there were some scenarios that they did implement the story, like Dagger in the Dark, that was the Vol'jin assassination, and with Moira later on, a variant that was all story-based. But there were also a couple... yeah, sorry?
Sorry, they were really well done, those ones.
Yeah, they were great, but there were also a couple ones that they kind of told a story, but not really well. For example, the Theramore one that you're talking about, the 85 thing was because it was open for a certain amount of time as an opening event to mob. And if you did it 85, you got like a special tabard or special bomb and stuff like that. But the story was told in a very poor way, so that's a risk that they have with the scenarios. So yeah, it could be cool to introduce that as a replacement for the group quest, as in this is where you get your story from. But Yeah, like once again, my experience with the mob leveling experience is great, and ever since Wrath of the Lich King, they've improved the level experience. Even in Keda, you got a whole bunch more story with Agra following Thrall and the wedding, and then its elements and stuff like that, and the revamp of the old zone with what was this, Rambo in his tank in Lakeshire, all kinds of really cool quest lines, really cool storylines if you follow them. And I hope that they kind of keep both in, like get scenarios to tell that story in a group setting, and keep the mob leveling experience. I wouldn't want to go back to the Keda, to the classic Burning Crusade leveling setting where you just had to grind those levels, boring quests. I would prefer the mob leveling experience.
Yeah, they got the main storyline quest lines in Warlords of Draenor, and I'm like, yes, absolutely. Like, finally, we've got a thing that says this is the major story. This is where we're putting our effort in. And you got the side quests that are like, go collect 10 of these things you don't care about. That's what I wanted. That makes it so that I know that this has some relevance to the world. They've gone and put a lot of story into it. I know that David Kosak has gone here and said, let's put this cool thing in. I know that now because it's a main storyline, and that's perfect.
Yeah, it's a good change, definitely.
Yeah. Can we move on to the dungeon things? Because I'm so raring to get to tear into these things. Well, unless you're not done.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about scenarios. You touched on heroic scenarios replacing new heroic dungeons, and I've heard different opinions about this. Like, some people really enjoyed it, some really hated it that we didn't get new dungeons. What do you think about that?
Well, the whole problem there is that I can't see the development process. I can't see their tools. That's the very important thing. I need to be able to see how long it takes their team to develop dungeons as compared to scenarios. I mean, they've complained that it takes too long to set up environments for dungeons, but then scenarios are exactly the same. You've got environments there. Are they saying that for every dungeon they need a new environment? Because I think that's just a joke. Like, they don't need a new environment. Look at BC. You had like 16 dungeons all reusing the same art style for like ramparts and the blood furnace, and you got the what do you call it? The slave pens and the other water place with Naga. Steam.
Yeah,
or something.
Steam Vaults.
Yeah.
But what they mean with scenarios is like most scenarios are placed in a setting already in the world. So all they need to do is drop a bunch of new NPCs in it, get a storyline going, and boom, you have a new scenario. Whereas a dungeon, you need to design the interior, you need to design the layout and bosses and mechanics and stuff like that. So I can see that dungeons would take more time in development.
I really don't think so. I think they can just take places in the world that are open and just turn them into dungeon areas. I mean, the whole difference between a heroic scenario and a heroic dungeon is that first off, you don't really need a tank or a healer. You don't need any set roles. And second off, you have more people in the group, and you have bosses with abilities and mechanics. Mm-hmm. So a dungeon, I feel like what they're saying is they've got the same teams for raid bosses and dungeon bosses. Scenarios are kind of like elaborate trash, really, really difficult trash.
Yeah.
Now, as I said before, I think heroic scenarios succeeded. Normal scenarios were a complete failure, but heroic scenarios succeeded. Heroic dungeons need to maintain the tank healer DPS composition. In terms of boss mechanics, I feel like they're overthinking it. I feel like if they need more space for the bosses, if they need set environments, then they can literally take their art from other places and reuse it. They can take places that already exist and use that. It's just a case of you got one heroic dungeon and one heroic scenario. They're both trying to cater to the same audience, just like raids and dungeons have the same teams, development teams. Mm-hmm. So if they're having a problem designing all the mechanics on a boss, then why can't you just take mechanics from like an old boss and like rejig it, or maybe an old raid and rejig it to work on this heroic dungeon boss? I mean, as I said, it's really difficult to say all this without looking at the development tools, but I feel like they could work around the fact that they have the same teams on raids and dungeons. They could just reuse things from their old places, and I think people would roll with that. I don't feel like people would complain.
I don't know
Just
about that. And I mean, I can see the complaints coming like, oh my god, you're just rehashing old content. What is this bullshit? I want new stuff, new stuff, new stuff.
yeah, I mean, well, there'd always be that feedback. But I mean, if you have a look at heroic scenarios, like how many people complained that it was set in an area that's already in the world? Like most of those areas, people hadn't even been in, or like they hadn't been in for a while, or they just hadn't spent a lot of time there. In terms of reusing boss mechanics, I mean, they already do that. They already do that with pretty much every tanking mechanic ever. We have the tank swap. Like that's one mechanic that they reuse over and over and over.
Yeah, that's true.
But people are pretty much fine with that. They they want to avoid the rehash feeling, but they don't mind rehashing where people wouldn't mind it. And I feel like just me, I just feel like people wouldn't mind the fact that if they reuse certain environments, certain mechanics, that it would work. That's the whole thing with BC. You don't notice the fact that they reuse pretty much half of their dungeon set for another dungeon set because they have the whole theme of, winged dungeons.
Yeah.
It's the simplest thing. It's just them reusing a certain development, but people are fine with it. So I don't know.
I can see where you come
I don't know how the internet works. They probably complain.
from. Well, I can see complainers, but then again, we have complainers now. I've seen a 30-minute video of someone doing scenarios on the PTR, and a 30-minute video of bitching about scenarios, and I was like, okay, I can understand that you don't like scenarios, but was there really the need of making a 30-minute complaint about it? And on the subject of scenarios versus heroics, like you said, heroic scenarios, I really enjoy them, especially also with the storytelling behind them, a little bit of difficulty in it, not much, just a little bit. You had to form a group in order to enter it, which was great. But I don't like the excuse that Blizzard is making, like, do you want scenarios or do you want heroics? To which I always answer, why not both? I mean, you're not cutting my subscription fee in half, so why are you cutting my content in half? And yeah. I don't like using that excuse. If you're going for the ultimate experience with WoW, if you want to improve it, then you gotta stop giving that excuse and then you gotta try and make it work. Now, this is very easy for me to say. I don't work at Blizzard. I don't know what resources they have. I just don't like that excuse.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always looking at the development process and all their tweets and everything, and I'm trying to work out how they do things. And from everything I could gather, they have the same team on raids and dungeons. That's why they say in a patch, like Trial of the Crusader was like the biggest example. The whole reason Trial of the Crusader came out was because they wanted to work on the dungeons for the Ice Crown raid.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 really, really good dungeons. They said that the whole reason they made a crappy patch was because of that. They wanted to make it super epic. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, then surely there are ways around it. Like, if they have to recruit more people in order, like double their team in order to have like one team on dungeons and one team was on raids, then do it. Like,
Exactly.
people want this stuff. Like, I totally agree. Like, why not both? And it's difficult to work out why, even though they're given a reason for it. Like, I still don't really, I don't trust that reason either. But they've got to work out some way to get both. I mean, I'm sure we're like full on in the dungeon the topic right now.
Well,
Yeah.
speaking, I mean, I can ask you the question right now if you want me to.